Eyo Value Investors, how are you doing? My name is Stijn and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're looking at two different graphite mining companies and we'll be comparing them in depth. Which is the better graphite or EV play? The first company we'll be looking at is Gratomic, or these ticker symbols. And the second one is of course Nouveau Monde Graphite, or these ticker symbols. We'll be comparing them by talking about the following subjects. First, Nouveau Monde's value proposition. Second, Gratomic's value proposition. Third, the pros and cons of each. And lastly, which is the better pick. Let's go. So, Nouveau Monde Graphite. I've done a lot of videos on this company specifically, so I'd advise watching this video if you want to go more in depth into this company specifically. But in short, they plan to become a carbon neutral graphite producer, locally producing graphite for the European and North American markets. Besides producing the raw flake graphite, they also plan to construct a purification plant where they plan to take the raw graphite and turn it into battery anode material. This battery anode material can then be used by any lithium-ion battery producer, but most importantly electric vehicle manufacturers. As to their value proposition, Nouveau Monde Graphite's plans to produce around 100,000 tons of graphite a year from their Metamini project, starting from 2023. There are also plans to upgrade this to 200,000 tons a year, or potentially even more, but there isn't any concrete information just yet. So this is slightly speculative, but I totally believe this will happen in the future. So besides producing this 100,000 tons of flake graphite with plans to upgrade to 200,000 tons or more in the future, they will also start out producing around 45,000 tons of battery anode material from their purification plant. And on their own investors presentation, they say that they expect to do $252 million in earnings from 2024 and onwards. Once they do 200,000 tons of graphite a year, anywhere from 2025 and onwards, that number would double, and it effectively puts them at $500 million in earnings a year starting from 2026 and onwards. Now, if we slap on a PE ratio of 15, which is fairly conservative, we would get to a future market cap of $7.5 billion from 2026 and onwards, or about $200 per share. And if we calculate that back at 15% a year for 5 years, that would put us at a fair price to pay today for Nouveau Monde Graphite of $100 per share. And therefore, with a margin of safety of 50%, we would get to a heavy buy target of $50 per share. And of course, the company is trading way below that, and that is because they haven't really produced much yet and they still need to prove their worth. But it is good knowing that the company could go up to $100 per share shortly from now and might even 10x in share price in just 5 years. So now that we know what Nouveau Monde Graphite is planning to produce, and we have an idea as to how high their valuations could fly just years from now, let's take a look at Gratomic's value proposition. So Gratomic is a junior mining company that plans to extract their material from a high-grade graphite vein in Namibia, so on the continent of Africa. Besides this Alchem project in Africa, they also have the rights to the Buckingham Graphite property in Quebec, Canada, which hasn't been developed just yet, but could easily be developed in the following decade. Contrary to Nouveau Monde, Gratomic is actually already operational and will produce around 20,000 metric tons of graphite a year starting from this year. This graphite will be coming from their Alchem project in Namibia, on which they have a lease of 19 years currently. However, they have signed an agreement to acquire the Alchem property in its entirety. So fairly soon, Gratomic will have the complete authority over the Alchem property, and this will be good for operating margins. Gratomic's graphite is actually even more pure than Nouveau Monde's is, at almost 99% purity right out of the ground. And after on-site purification, it will be 99.9% pure. A great part of Gratomic's value proposition is that it's a vein right at the surface of the earth. Just on the surface, there are about 23,000 tons of graphite just laying around, just waiting to be processed. Gratomic is expected to raise the total production of the Alchem property to around 100,000 tons of graphite a year. Maybe even 200,000 or 300,000 tons a year of total production in combination with their Buckingham Graphite property. To be conservative, let's say they plan to mine around 100,000 tons a year from 2026 and onwards, at around $1,500 per ton, which is the same price as Nouveau Monde. Now, let's say they have a capex of $500 per ton, which would be very similar to Nouveau Monde's. We don't know the exact numbers for Gratomic, so to be conservative, we'll just take the numbers we know. But a cost of $500 per ton would give them a gross profit of $1,000 per ton at these prices. So 100,000 tons times $1,000 per ton results in a gross profit or earnings of around $100 million a year. That's an insane value proposition, especially for a company that's trading at around $160 million total market cap. But $100 million times the same PE ratio as Nouveau Monde, so 15, would put the company at a total market cap of $1.5 billion from 2026 and onwards. A $1.5 billion market cap would put Gratomic at around $10 per share in 2026, which, if we calculate back, would get us to a fair value of around $5 today and a margin of safety price of around $2.5 per share. So, just like Nouveau Monde, Gratomic could almost 10x in share price in just 5 years. It's amazing how similar these value propositions are, and they have almost the same potential up to around 2026. And it is good to know that these 100,000 tons, the graphite prices and the operating expenses per ton are all very conservative. Therefore, this company could reach way higher in the future, just an added bonus. So, we now know each value proposition and just how similar they actually are. Let's look at some characteristics that make them both stand out. Let's first look at 3 pros for Nouveau Monde Graphite. First, Nouveau Monde Graphite has a management team that really knows how to portray the company. And what I mean by that is that they have awesome and informative videos on their YouTube channel. Their website just looks amazing, and they have an investor's presentation that a dum-dum like me can actually understand. Second, Nouveau Monde Graphite has a contract with Hydro-Québec, so they can get green hydropower for cheap, which is just awesome. That means that if they can get a good deal with OEM electrical equipment makers, they can become carbon neutral extremely easily. And that is, of course, extremely attractive for any customer. Third, they are located in North America. And with the US becoming more and more domestically focused on their supply chains, that makes car makers more likely to use locally sourced materials. 3 pros, so now 2 cons for Nouveau Monde Graphite. The flake graphite they mine out of the ground isn't as pure as some other mines, like Gratomic for example. And second, Nouveau Monde Graphite will have more trouble scaling to more than 200,000 tons a year than Gratomic will, which isn't worrisome for the current value proposition, but once Nouveau Monde Graphite will reach 200,000 tons a year, they will have a harder time to grow from there. So now that we've talked all about Nouveau, what about Gratomic? So first, 3 pros. First, obviously they are already operational starting from this year. No speculation, they will be generating cash flows from this year. Awesome. Second, they'll have a way easier time to scale from the 20,000 tons a year all the way up to hundreds of thousands of tons a year, especially with their untapped property in Quebec. And third, they'll probably have a lower capital expenditure per ton than Nouveau Monde. And that is because they have surface located graphite. And this is combined with extremely pure vein graphite right at the surface. And this will probably make them more profitable per ton than Nouveau Monde. And of course, 2 cons for Gratomic now. First, their location. They're currently located in Africa, which is fine, just not as good as being located mainly in Quebec, Canada, like Nouveau. And second, their management isn't that well versed in portraying the company as a sexy investment. They are currently mainly talking from geological and mining perspective, which makes their information, news or investors presentation extremely hard to digest. And this isn't the biggest of problems, just that if more investors could understand how great their value proposition is, more would actually invest. And more investors buying into the stock would certainly mean a higher share price. Okay, we've talked extensively about both Nouveau's and Gratomic's value proposition, their pros and their cons. But which one is better? Well, I'm no financial advisor, but when speaking for myself, the value propositions look extremely similar. Nouveau Monde Graphite has some more sexy prospects to it. For example, their carbon neutrality, location and their great communications. But Gratomic has an easier scalable business and might be set up better for exponential growth. However, Gratomic is just worse at conveying their value proposition to the masses. And for a company to succeed, they need a solid business plan. and Gratomic sure has that. But for a company to also enjoy a high valuation on the stock market, it needs a following. And to have that, we investors need to hear a clear story from the CEO himself. And I don't know, to me Gratomic is just doing a way worse job at portraying themselves as a sexy investment, especially compared to Eyo and Nouveau Monde Graphite. As we speak, I'm heavily invested in Nouveau Monde with about 40% of my portfolio in this company. And currently I own 0 shares of Gratomic. But that doesn't mean Gratomic is a bad investment. Actually, thanks to the persuasion of GRAT.V on YouTube, I finally did the comparison in this video. See, thanks to Gratomic's mainly mining jargon based communications, I just couldn't bring myself to actually dig deeper. But thanks to Jeff, I finally completed my due diligence on this company. And I cannot tell you with 100% certainty whether Nouveau Monde Graphite or Gratomic will return greater in the following 10 years. But thankfully, we as investors do not need to decide. I'm planning to keep my position in Nouveau Monde Graphite as is. Maybe buy a couple of shares more when there are dips to come. But I will also add a couple of shares of Gratomic to my portfolio. And what you should do, well, that's of course for you to decide. I really hope you guys enjoyed this comparison between Nouveau Monde Graphite and Gratomic. And if you did, please give it a like and maybe even subscribe. Comment down below what you want to talk about next, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.